I went to the temple, and it was an old yellow house in the University District in Seattle, Washington. And so I opened the door and I looked inside, and immediately I saw they had an altar, and on this altar there were little deities of Lord Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra. So at this time, the only deities we had were the ones in San Francisco, which were carved by Shamasundar, and then he carved a smaller set of deities that we kept in Seattle. And so there was only 2 sets of deities in ISKCON. Of course, as I said, at this time there's only 7 temples in ISKCON, but we had one set in Seattle and one set in San Francisco. And so when I saw the deities, I knew that they were going to, next thing they were going to do is they were going to chant Hare Krishna. So I went to the back of the temple room, and I was waiting, and then they started chanting Hare Krishna. And so, it was exciting for me because this was my first time to chant with other people. Before I was chanting by myself, but now I had other people, and so I chanted with them. And it was, as you know, that kirtans can be very ecstatic. And so we chanted and chanted and chanted, and I was in ecstasy. And then when the chanting stopped, then of course, what comes after the kirtan? A lecture. Yes, and so one devotee began speaking about Krishna, and I was listening to this, and then it was, very exciting, and then we sat down to eat after this, and they started bringing the different preparations from the the kitchen or from the altar to give to the people who had come to the temple. And so I had already been a vegetarian for a long time, and I was making many dishes. And so when they gave me some food like pakoras or puris or things like this, and then I said, "Oh, I know how to make these," because I was making all of these preparations that they were serving independently. So somehow I'd been inspired by Super Soul to make these different preparations, and it was quite exciting. And so I'd become more and more interested. And one boy sat down next to me, and his name was Haridas. And he began to tell me about Srila Prabhupada. So I didn't know anything about Srila Prabhupada, but he began to tell me that, Srila Prabhupada is a great guru, and he's going to start a world Sankirtan party. And so he's going to select 13 people to join him and take them with him around the world, and they would perform Sankirtan in so many different countries. And he said there would be so many mridanga players, so many kartal players, so many dancers, and someone to lead the kirtan. And so I didn't pay too much attention to that. It sounded very nice. But then after eating the prasadam, I had become inspired, and I told him that I want to join this temple. So, and he says, when do you want to join? And I said, right now. Yeah, so I joined the temple that evening, and you know, they put me to work right away. The one thing is that, you know, getting up early for Mangal Arti was very difficult for most people, but because I'd been kind of a yogi and I was very austere, so for me getting up was very easy. So they made me the pujari my first day in the temple, and I had to take care of Lord Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra, and I would get up and I would, and I, huh?
Even you are not initiated.
Yeah, and then I have to, of course, sing the samsara prayers, the prayers to the. So I didn't know these, you know. So I had them on a piece of paper, and I would look at the paper, and I would chant these prayers, and I would do this, and then later in the morning, the other boys would get up, and then they would start their daily activities, and because most of the preparations that we had at the Sunday feast, I already knew how to cook, so they also made me the cook. So I had just joined the temple, I was the cook, and I was the pujari. So we would spend our day, we would go out every day and do Harinam on the street. Normally we would stand in front of a department store and we would chant and try to collect donations. Now, at that time we didn't have any books. There was no books. The only books we had was the Srimad Bhagavatam that Srila Prabhupada had translated, the 3 volumes of first canto. And so when I first joined the temple, that's the first thing they did. They gave me these 3 books, and this is what we had to study. And they said, we studied these books. These are our Bible. And so, you know, if you've seen the thing, it has the Sanskrit and these other things in there. It seems very complicated to me and confusing. So I just accepted it. And when we'd go out, we would just try to get a donation from somebody. We would tell them, oh, can I get a donation from you? And many times they would give us some donations, which was very nice, and it helped us a lot. And it was how we spent our time. So every day doing this, and on some occasions, there was a temple in Vancouver, Canada, which is just across the border from our temple in Seattle, Washington. So we would go from time to time to Vancouver, and we would do kirtan with them. So there was 4 devotees there, and we had 4 devotees in our temple. And so we would do kirtan like this. And when you have kirtan with 4 people every day, and then you suddenly have 8 people, it becomes like ecstasy, because the intensity of the kirtans was much greater, and it was so nice. It was very, very peaceful and joyful to do this. So, as I said, we didn't have any books, but we had a mission to fulfill, and that was to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's desire. So he wanted to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, and unfortunately, he had a bunch of ragamuffin young boys. We were all young boys at that time, and it was our responsibility to spread Krishna consciousness, to preach, and it became very obvious that Krishna is, what are the Krishna's qualities? One is that he's all attractive, and so people would come to our Sunday feast, or we'd meet them on the streets, and just by them hearing Krishna's name, they would become excited, and he impregnated the hearts of so many people, and they gradually became, devotees themselves. So this was in 1967. So what were you guys doing in 1967? Many of you were not even born yet. Right. So, and some of you that were born, you were most probably in Maya. So, but we went to San Francisco from Seattle to San Francisco to attend the first Rath Yatra festival, the big one. They had one earlier that I saw in 1967, but this one they had built 3 carts, and they had a deity on each cart, and then the devotees, started to come from different centers around the West Coast area, and we were excited because Srila Prabhupada was going to come to this festival, and for me this would be my first time to physically see Srila Prabhupada. So I was very excited. I got involved in helping cook the feast for the Rath Yatra patrons, and on the day of the Rath Yatra festival, the cart came and it stopped, and then Srila Prabhupada got out of his car, and there are many pictures of him in this festival, jumping up and down, dancing. And then if you look closely, I'm there next to him. So I was also excited, and because I saw my Guru Maharaj for the first time, and he was in ecstasy by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and I also was in ecstasy by seeing him and also hearing him chant the holy name of the Lord, unadulterated chanting, pure by the Vaishnava. And so I was very excited. And so, this was the first time for me to physically see Prabhupada. And then after this, we went back to Seattle, and Prabhupada went to Los Angeles, and then he went to New York. So he was always very busy traveling from here to there, always preaching. And so once we got back to Seattle, then some time had passed since I joined the movement. About 2 years had passed, and so it was time for me to get initiated. So I went to Los Angeles with a few other boys who were also going to get initiated, and we went to the Los Angeles Temple, which for us was very huge because it was a big building, and we'd come from a little tiny house, where we had lived, and we were doing our service from that little house. But the house, the temple they had was a big old church, and so it was very exciting, and there were so many devotees there, and they would go out on Sankirtan every day, and there would be so many people chanting, and you never experienced so many people at one time chanting, and so it was very blissful for us, at least for me. And in the morning, we would sit in the temple room before Mangal Arti, and we would chant and chant and chant and chant and chant. And then one day, there was some boy who came down, and he put on the Prabhupada's Vyasasan, his chair where he sat, he put a reel-to-reel recording device. So at this time there was no cassette players or anything like that, but just one reel-to-reel recording device. And I said, "What are they doing?" And he said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada's going to come down." And I became so excited. So I went and I sat right in front of Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasan, and I wanted to impress him and show them I was a great yogi, because living in Hawaii, I had been doing so much yoga every day, and I could do all of the asanas and postures. And so I sat in front of Prabhupada's Vyasasan, and I put my legs in the lotus position, and I was sitting there, and I was chanting very vigorously. And then Srila Prabhupada came, and he sat down on his Vyasasan, and he began chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And then he was chanting and chanting, and I was sitting there, and I was trying to mimic him, chant the same as he was chanting, word for word as he was chanting. But during this time, my legs became so painful sitting in the lotus position, I couldn't take it anymore. And so I uncrossed my legs, and I pulled my legs up in the fetal position, like this. And then Prabhupada was chanting, and then he stopped, and he looked at me, and he said, "Sit properly." So these are probably words that everyone has heard Prabhupada say. So everyone wanted to know, who did he say that to? It was me. It was the very first words that Prabhupada ever spoke to me. So I was, very humbled at that time. But the next day, I was supposed to get initiated. And so, as I told you, we didn't have any books at that time. So, if Prabhupada gave you a name, you had to remember the name, and you didn't know who that person was or what, So he would explain briefly who that person was in Krishna's Leela. But when we were sitting around the fire doing the yajna, I kept thinking to myself, oh, I hope Prabhupada gives me an easy name. I hope he gives me an easy name. What am I going to do if he gives me some name I can't remember? And so I kept thinking like this, and then Prabhupada was chanting on our beads, and he had began calling up each of us one by one to come up to get our beads and get our name. And the first devotee to go up, his name was John, Bhakta John. But Srila Prabhupada said, your name is, Sridhar. And then I said, oh, Sridhar, that's a pretty easy name. I can remember Sridhar.
Sridhar.
Huh?
That's Sridhar Maharaj?
Yeah.
Bombay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So he got that name, and then, I said, oh, that's easy. I said, if I get a name like that, it'll be easy. And then the next devotee to go up, Prabhupada, he asks, what are the 4 regulated principles? How many rounds will you chant? can you do this? Can you do this? And of course we always say yes. And so then Prabhupada gave the boy his beads, and he said, your name is Romaharshan Sutta. And who knows who Romaharshan Sutta is? Do you know? Romaharshan Sutta. Sutta Goswami's father. So, and when that, we didn't know who that was, because we had no books. And then I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can never remember a name like that. Oh, Prabhupada, give me easy name, please. And he's very intuitive. He knows what you're thinking all the time. And so next it was my turn to go up, and he called my Karmi name, and I went up to get my beads, and he gave me my beads, and he asked me what the 4 regulated principles are, and how many rounds was I going to chant every day, and was it possible for me to follow these principles? And I said, yes, Prabhupada, I can do this, I can do this. And then he says, good, your name is Gopal. And then he said, Gopal. He says, is that okay? And I said, oh yes, Prabhupada, that's very good name, thank you so much. And so from that day I became Gopal Das. And from this point, my life took a big, of course it took a big change once I stepped into the Krishna temple for the first time, but ISKCON was beginning to grow a little bit. So they had a new temple, New Vrindavan, which is in West Virginia, and it's our first farm community. And so I went to New Vrindavan, and when I got to New Vrindavan, I met one boy. His name was Devakinandan, and he had been my Karmi friend before we became devotees. He also became a devotee. So we had moved to Hawaii, and he went to Oahu, and I went to Maui Island. And so in Oahu, he joined the devotees there, and then he became Devakinandan. And I saw him in New Vrindavan. I was so happy to see him, and he was in charge of the cows there in New Vrindavan. So we were getting ready for Janmashtami, and it was the first Janmashtami festival to be held in New Vrindavan. And so we had made preparations, and at the same time in ISKCON there had been some controversy going on. Some devotees from Los Angeles had been fabricating these myths about Srila Prabhupada, saying that he was God. And so they were preaching like this, and Srila Prabhupada, he became very disturbed with these boys. And so he said, you must take sannyas. So, and you must go out and preach and purify yourselves. So there were several boys, Gargamuni, Brahmananda, Vishnujan, Subal, and Kartikeya, and one other boy. But he had given these guys sannyas. So we were in New Vrindavan, and we were sitting outside on the side of a hill, and we were, everyone was excited because the sannyasis were going to come. And, we had never seen sannyasis before. There was no sannyasis in ISKCON. And so Kirtananda was there, but he's already sannyas, but we didn't see him. He was somewhere else. Yeah, but we didn't know what he was doing. But anyway, we were sitting there, and then these boys came, sannyasis with their dandas, walking, very proud, walking up like this, and then they immediately began to preach that Srila Prabhupada is God. And they kept going on and on that Srila Prabhupada is God. And then I couldn't take this anymore. So I stood up and I said, "You're a liar! Prabhupada never said he's God."
Right.
He says, "If you think you're God, you are a dog." And so, all the other devotees, from the different temples, "Oh, don't talk to sannyasis like that." And I said, "No, I'm not going to listen to this bullshit. Prabhupada never said anything like that." And so, at least I had to stand up for Prabhupada in this way. And eventually they left and went somewhere else, but there was one boy that I had met in New Vrindavan. He had been a devotee in Vancouver, and he had been a brahmachari, and then he got married. And so his name was Rudra, and his wife he married, her name was Rukmini. And so I told him, he says, "We have to do something for Prabhupada. What can we do for Prabhupada, Because they said that Prabhupada was going to leave America and he was never going to come back to India or come back to America again. He was going to stay in India. So we were afraid that we were going to lose Prabhupada forever, but we had to make a mark and we had to do something for him." He said, "We have to help him spread this movement." So I said, so we decided we will go to Chicago, the three of us, and we started a temple in Chicago. So there was the first temple in Chicago, and of course we don't have any money. We have very little funds and this and that, but somehow we were able to manage a temple, and we started this temple, and it was very good. And then we would go out during the day and we would do kirtan on the street. And Chicago is very cold, very, 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 very cold. And two of us would chant and one of us would collect. And by this time we had some magazines. The BBT had started printing Back to Godhead magazines, and so we had magazines to sell. And this was very good. And then one day I got a telephone call, and it was from Los Angeles. And then the person on the other end told me, they said that Srila Prabhupada wants you to go to India with him. And so I was so excited. Prabhupada chose me, as one of the 13 devotees to go with him to India. And they told me that you go to New York and you'll meet the other devotees who are going to go to India with Prabhupada. And so I went to New York, and these devotees that I met for the first time, I don't know if I can remember all their names. There was Dinanath. Dinanath was our first African American devotee, and then there was Giriraj, who became Giriraj Swami, and then Rabadi Nandan, and some others. Anyway, there was several of us there, and we would go out in the daytime in New York City, and we would have our own separate Sankirtan party. We would collect money to pay for our tickets to go to India. And so as we collected, things got better and time became shorter, and it became time for us to leave the mainland or leave America and go to India, start our journey towards India. So our first flight was to Brussels, and we got to Brussels, and then in Brussels we met up with Shamasundar, Gurudas, Jamuna, Malati, and Saraswati, their little daughter. And then from there we got on a special propeller plane and flew to Egypt. And when we got to Egypt, from there we had to wait and for our next flight. But this was a Muslim country, and we had never experienced being in a Muslim country like that before. And it was a bit shocking because they were, everyone had beards and mustaches, and they looked very intimidating. And so we just sort of followed them. And then when our plane arrived, it was a propeller plane. So we didn't have a jet. We had an old propeller plane. So we got on the flight, and we flew to Bombay. And so arriving in India, each of us were experiencing our journey in different ways, and I'm sure we all had different thoughts going through our minds. But we were all in anticipation to what this journey was going to bring us. And so we arrived in Bombay, and when we got out of the plane, then one businessman from Bombay, Kailas Sectarian was his name, he was waiting for us with cars, and he transported us to his house, a big house, and we hadn't experienced the opulence of rich men in India, but it was a new experience. It was very, very wonderful, and his family was very kind, and he put us up in different rooms, and because we were, brahmacharis, at least I was a brahmachari, and we were very strict, very austere, and didn't want any things like this. But the women, they immediately began getting spoiled by the Matajis from the big house we were staying in, and they were taking them out every day to buy, new saris and whatever else the women needed, and so they were very excited and everything. And but for us, we just kept our normal clothes. We didn't want anything, but we would go out every day to do kirtan. We'd do sankirtan on the streets, and then we would come back and prasadam. Oh, they always fed us so much food. We were eating like wild, ravaged animals, eating so much food. It was delicious because we weren't accustomed to so many delicious foods. And many of the boys began getting sick from overeating. So eventually we had to cut back on our eating and become austere again and do this. But Srila Prabhupada, he hadn't arrived in Bombay yet. And so Prabhupada had gone to, from Los Angeles, he went to Japan. And in Japan, he met with the president of Dai Nippon Insatsu. Dai Nippon Insatsu is the printing company we were using to print our books. So in Japanese, Dai means big, and Nippon is another name for Japan, and Insatsu means printers. So this means the big printer from Japan. And so Prabhupada had gone there to meet with them and to negotiate with them about printing Krishna book. So he wanted to get Krishna book printed. And he had money from George Harrison to pay for the printing of this Krishna books. And he also wanted to get additional versions of other books printed. And so they agreed to this. And he was able to do all of this just by his word. No money was changed hands, but he talked them into printing all of these books and doing everything for us. And so they printed these books for us. And then once he had got this agreement, he left and he came to Bombay. And so when he arrived in Bombay, we were all standing outside waiting for his car, and then Prabhupada got out of the car, and then everyone offered their obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, and then we were all so excited because we hadn't seen Prabhupada, and from this time, every one of us, we had so much personal association with Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada, he went upstairs to his room, and then we all followed him upstairs, and then immediately he began, the thing that I noticed is that he began preaching. And he would preach and preach and preach and preach and preach and preach. And we were, I'd never seen anyone preach so much. But Srila Prabhupada was invincible. He would just continue preaching so much, and all of us were ecstatic listening to Srila Prabhupada preach. And eventually, we began to do programs. So different businessmen would come to visit Srila Prabhupada, and he would preach to them, and they would arrange for some outside program. And they would arrange a pandal and such as this, and then we would go to the venue where the program was going to be held, and the pandal would be there, and we would go up onto the stage, all of us devotees who were traveling with Srila Prabhupada, and there would be a Vyasasan for Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada would sit in the Vyasasan, and then the guests would come and sit on the ground in front of the pandal, and many people would come, hundreds of people would come, and we would have kirtan chanting, and Srila Prabhupada would join us in the chanting, and it was quite ecstatic, and the guests, they would also participating in the chanting, and every program was ecstasy. And then afterwards, someone would invite us to come to their house for prasadam. So we started eating again. So sometimes 3 times a day, people would invite us to their house to eat. And Prabhupada saw that a lot of the boys and girls were getting sick, and so he said, from now on, no more eating. So yeah, we're going to become serious. No more eating, just chanting. And so reluctantly, many of the devotees agreed to this, and then they started not eating as much. And we all started to get better. And we went from one city to the next city, to the next city, to the next city. And we would have kirtan. And so in this way, we spread Prabhupada's movement all throughout northern India. And so the program was normally, someone would arrange a pandal, and we would go to the pandal, the program where the venue where we were going to chant, and we would all go up on the stage, and we would sit around the Vyasasan, and Srila Prabhupada would come, and then we would have kirtan, and we would sing and we would dance, and then Srila Prabhupada from his Vyasasan, he would also join us and play kartals and chant with us. And the audience, all the people in the audience, they would also join us, and they would begin dancing and singing. And so the programs were very vibrant, and the people were going crazy, chanting and singing Hare Krishna. And so for me, I became so excited because I could feel that this is what Krishna consciousness is really about. You see the devotees are chanting, and so many people that, just like with Lord Chaitanya's parties, they join his congregations, and hundreds and thousands of people would chant. And so this is what we did, and they would go crazy. But then one program we went to, I was the first one to go up on the stage. And when I got to the top of the stairs, going onto the stage, I saw the Vyasasan. There was this Mayavadi sannyasi or guru sitting on the Vyasasan. And then next to him, there were like 6 or 7 chokis, these little square things. And one of his sannyasis each one was sitting on these chokis. And when I saw this guy in the Vyasasan, I stopped in front of him and I pointed my finger at him and I says, "Get out of that Vyasasan. This is Prabhupada's Vyasasan." And then I said that to him. And Prabhupada was right behind me, and he was chanting on his beat. And so he sort of motioned to me, says, it's okay, don't worry. So Prabhupada, he walked past all of the others, sannyasi disciples of the guru, and he sat at the very end. And then this Mayavadi guru began giving his lecture, and he was speaking in Hindi, so we don't know what he was saying, but Prabhupada was chanting on his beads, and he kept squeezing his beads harder and harder and harder, chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And he's listening, he's absorbing everything they were saying, and then finally he looked at me and he said, "Chant." So on the stage there was only 2 devotees, myself and Dinanath. The other devotees had to sit down below on the floor with the other patrons. And so I had kartals, Dinanath had a drum, and we began chanting. We had a kirtan, and we were chanting and chanting. Then the other devotees joined us, and then slowly the entire people had come to the program. They also began to chant, and then they were dancing, and then Prabhupada took his kartals out, and he started playing and chanting and rocking back and forth. And this kept going on, and the kirtan was getting louder and louder and louder, and the people were becoming more excited and taking part in the kirtan, and the Mayavadi guru, he stopped his lecture, and all of his sannyasi disciples, they were looking at us, and this guy, finally he got up from the Vyasasan, and he left the stage with his head down, and then all of his disciples followed him off, and they all stumbled off the stage and left the program. And we continued the program and kept chanting for some time. Now, normally what would happen is that at the end of a kirtan, Srila Prabhupada would give a lecture. But this time, Srila Prabhupada didn't give a lecture. We just continued chanting and chanting and chanting. And finally, it was, time to go. So Prabhupada, he got up and he went down to his car, and I went with Srila Prabhupada, and we got in the car. There was two devotees who got in the car, and myself, and then Srila Prabhupada, and then we started to leave, and Prabhupada was very radiant. He was chanting because he was in ecstasy because of the program we had there, and the impression we had made on all of these people. And then Prabhupada was going, and then Prabhupada said, he said, "We kicked those Mayavadis' ass." And then he said, "Yes, Prabhupada, you kicked them right in their ass." And then he went back, he continued chanting, went back to his room in Bombay. And then he was tired, so he went to bed, and so we also went to bed. But we continued traveling like this to different cities and everything, and the programs were always prearranged, where we would go together, and then we began a life membership program where we started giving people the opportunity to become a life member of ISKCON, where they would get all of our books and have the opportunity to stay in our temples anywhere in the world if they want. You know the life membership program. And then...
They have 1,111, right?
Yeah.
1,111.
Yeah, 100. Yeah. So anyway, we did like this, and then we continued our traveling, and so Prabhupada had plans to go to Vrindavan, come here to Vrindavan, and so we were stopped at one station, and I was so excited because I was going to go to Vrindavan. I was going to come here to Vrindavan. And I kept walking. We were in the train, but we had stopped at one station, and so I was walking up and down on the platform, and I said, we're going to Vrindavan, we're going to Vrindavan, we're going to Vrindavan. And so I was so excited thinking that I could come to Vrindavan. But then someone told me, he says, "Srila Prabhupada wants to see you." So he was in his car, the train car, and so I went to Prabhupada's room, and there was Guru Das and Jamuna. They were in the room with Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada says, "I want you to go to Delhi." So my dreams of coming here to Vrindavan were immediately dashed, and so I knew I wasn't going. But of course you have to fulfill the will of your Guru Maharaj. He wants you to go to Delhi, you go. And so we went to Delhi, and we didn't have any program to do. We had to find somewhere to stay, and so we found these little near the train station, these little rooms that we rented for practically nothing, and they were like a dump, really dumb. But we met one man on the street, and he was working for a man named Dalmia. So Dalmia is a rich guy in Delhi, and so he invited us to come to his house for prasadam. And so we went to his house to take prasadam, and then he had all of his servants preparing such beautiful prasadam, and they served us on golden plates.
Really?
Yeah, they were all gold, and we didn't know what to expect of this, but they gave us golden plates and they talked to us, and then they became our life members. He arranged for other men to become life members, and so we had made several life members, and then we went back and we joined the other party, the rest of the devotees, and with Srila Prabhupada, and we explained to him what had happened. So he was very happy that our preaching method, and of course when we were in Delhi, we met Indira Gandhi. So she was the Prime Minister in India. So we met her, and she invited us to come to her compound where she was conducting her business, running the country. So it was very exciting, And she was very diplomatic, always very diplomatic in this. But Prabhupada was also happy that we had met with Indira Gandhi, but we missed coming here to Vrindavan. So that's one thing that I regret, because I'd always wanted to come to Vrindavan. So we left and we went to Allahabad. In Allahabad, they were having a Kumbh Mela festival. So this was our first Kumbh Mela festival to go to. And for us, it was very exciting, So Prabhupada was saying, you're going to see so many sadhus and so many yogis, but don't become offensive to any of these, because some of these men, they may be 500 years old, and you don't know. So they're all very special yogis, and so Prabhupada said, don't make any offenses to them. And so they built our pandal. The program we had was a pandal, and because it was cold, they would build one tent, and then they'd put another tent on the outside of that, so it gave some insulation to keep us warm. And then Prabhupada had a separate tent next to the main pandal, and I was kind of the guard watching after Srila Prabhupada. So between the two tents, that's where I stayed. I slept on the ground next to that, and I would protect Prabhupada from any intruders who would come. And if he had any needs in the middle of the night, then I would, of course, have to take care of them. But one night, I was there in my bed, and it was very cold, very, very, very cold. And suddenly Srila Prabhupada got up, to go to the bathroom. He was getting ready to go to the bathroom. And so I heard a dog walking around outside of Prabhupada's tent near his bathroom. And this dog knocked over Prabhupada's water pot and broke it. And so I knew that there was no water there. But then Srila Prabhupada came out and he went to go to the toilet. And I thought, what am I going to do? There's no water for Srila Prabhupada to wash his hands. What's going to happen? And so I said, I have to do something. And so I had one lota. You all know what a lota is, right? So I had one lota full of water. And so I went out and I stood next to the latrine or the bathroom, and Srila Prabhupada was inside. And then he came out of the bathroom and he was a little bit surprised because it's dark and I'm standing there. And then I told him, he says, Prabhupada, a dog broke your water pot, so there's no water for you. But I have this water. And so I had in my lota, I had it full of water. So Prabhupada was very happy, and then he held out his hands, and I dumped the water on his hands, and he looked at me and he says, you're a good boy. Yeah, so I was very happy. And the next day, Srila Prabhupada called me to give him a massage. Every day he would take a massage. And so I made preparations to go to give him a massage. So I went to the river early in the morning, took a bath, and put fresh tilak on. I went back and I wrapped a gamsha around my waist, and I was standing there, and I had all of the necessary things, oil and things that Prabhupada used to take his massage, and I was ready to give Prabhupada a massage, and he comes out, and I'm naked except for the gamsha I'm wearing, and then Prabhupada looks at me, and he says, "You're not a Brahmin?" And I felt, oh, I've committed some kind of aparad. And I said, no, Prabhupada, I haven't taken Brahmin initiation yet. And he said, oh, okay, you'll take immediately. So he'd give you Brahmin initiation immediately. And so I started to give him a massage. And he was very fragile, Prabhupada's body. He's old and he seemed very fragile. And I didn't want to hurt him. So I didn't apply much pressure when I was giving him a massage. And then he kept saying, harder, harder, harder. And I didn't know what to do. So I kept trying to go a little bit harder, but I couldn't satisfy Prabhupada in that. So fortunately, I think for me, he never asked me to come back again to give him another massage. But it was good. So, but I felt bad because I didn't fulfill his desire to get a good heavy massage. But he in the mornings, the devotees would congregate in the main pandal area, and Srila Prabhupada would read letters to us that had come from the West. Of course, mostly all America, because there was no temples in other countries at that time. But he would read these letters to us. And at this time, they had just started the GBC. Everyone knows GBC, yes? So they had just started the GBC. And in one letter, which was from Bali Mardan, he was a GBC member, and he was in charge of Asia. And so he was, Prabhupada was reading the letter, and in the letter, Bali Mardan had said, Singapore will be a good place for preaching. And so this was music to Srila Prabhupada's ears. He heard this, and so he took off his glasses, and he put down the letter, and all of us were sitting like you guys are here in front of Srila Prabhupada, except they were all on the floor. And he said, so, who will go? And then I was expecting someone who I felt was more senior than me to volunteer. And I was looking around, everyone in there, and all these people like Tamal and Brahmananda, they put their heads down, and no one was saying anything. And so I told Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I'll go. And then he said, oh, very good, you will leave immediately. And then one other boy named Hanuman, he said, Prabhupada, I'll go too. And then another devotee said, Srila Prabhupada, I'll go to Tehran. I think it was a Treya Rishi or someone like that. And then Prabhupada was looking around, and Brahmananda, you will go to Africa. So I had always wondered, the name of our organization was the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. But up until this point, we weren't international. We had a few temples in the United States, but at this time, I could see, oh yes, now this is becoming a true international society. And so what these other devotees did and where they went, I don't know, because I had my mission to go to Singapore. So I went with Hanuman. We went to Burma. Everyone knows Burma? Yeah, Myanmar. So we went there, and we stayed there for 7 days, but then we went to Singapore. And in Singapore we met two other devotees, Balimardan and Amoga. And one Chinese boy, his name was Li. Later he became Lalita Krishna, but he was there. And somehow Balimardan had arranged from this Chinese lady a big house. And so we had this huge house. And my first job was I had to build an altar. So this wouldn't be the first altar that I had to build, but I built an altar, and we didn't have deities, but we had pictures, Guru and Garanga. So we put these pictures on the altar, and then we would do our programs in the morning. But the Singapore government was very strict, and they didn't like Hare Krishna people. So they wouldn't allow us to do kirtan, and they kicked us out of the country. And so the other devotees, they went to Malaysia, and I had to stay in Singapore because we were having a shipment of books sent, and I had to wait for these books. And then when the books came, I rented a car, and I drove to join the other devotees in Malaysia. But Malaysia turned out to be a very fruitful place because they had so many Hindus, and they had many Hindu temples there. And we met with this one Indian lady. Her name was Kamala Devi. She was a lawyer, and her husband was a doctor. And they were building a bunch of, apartments and like strip malls in Malaysia. And so they said, we will give you some land, and you can open and build a Krishna temple here. But you have to build a Balaji temple because, she was from South India, and they worship Balaji in South India. And so she said, okay, well, that's not a problem. Balaji is Krishna also. So we wrote to Srila Prabhupada. And at this time, there's no internet. There's no, fax machines or anything, no computers, nothing. And so we had to send a snail mail to Srila Prabhupada, and we told him, Prabhupada, we've met this lady, she wants to donate some land to you, and she wants you to build a temple there. And then Prabhupada became so excited to hear that we had been successful. So Prabhupada wrote us back, and he says, "Thank you very much for helping me to spread Lord Chaitanya's mission, and I will come and I will join your Sankirtan party." And so it's very rewarding. So how many of you have done something that causes your Guru Maharaj to stop whatever they're doing and come to see you? So this doesn't happen very often, but Srila Prabhupada was so excited because we had been successful, and we invited him to come. He came to Malaysia, and he joined the party, and he met with this lady, Kamala Devi, and she took him to where she had this land that she was developing, and she said, "You choose any spot you want, and this will be yours, and you can build a temple here." And so Prabhupada was very excited, so he said, "Okay." So he went and he looked and he surveyed all of her land, and then he found the space that he wanted, and then he told the lady, says, "I want this land here." And he marked it out, so many feet this way, so many feet this way. And he said, "We will build a temple here." And he said, "In the meantime, before we start building, you build a hut, a small hut here on this land, and we will start doing worship now." So, the system in India is that if you build a temple, even if it's in the island on the side of the road, and you build a little Hanuman temple, then that's recognized as a temple. You've probably seen these before on the sides of the roads. And there's a pujari there doing worship during the day. But Prabhupada, he told her, "You build this temple." And then he said, "Yes, I'll do this for you, Swamiji." And so we took this opportunity to take Srila Prabhupada on tour of Malaysia. And so somebody had to arrange for the programs. And so, I always believe that, Srila Prabhupada said that service in separation is the highest form of service. And so the devotees, we would go to one location, and we would have a program there with Srila Prabhupada, but someone had to arrange for the next venue. So I always went ahead of the group to the next city, and I went and I arranged a place for Prabhupada to stay, and then make sure that he got the right foods and someone was there to take care of him. And then the devotees, once I had done all this, I would go back and join the other devotees, and then we would go by car to the next location where the next program is going to be held. And once we got there, then again I had to leave again and go to the next. So I was always one or two steps in front of all the other devotees. But somebody had to make arrangements, and the other devotees, they didn't want to leave Prabhupada's association. So I went and I made all these arrangements, and then we kept doing this until we reached the northernmost city in Malaysia. And Prabhupada was very successful there. People loved him in Penang and Ipoh and these different cities. He just melted their hearts. And then we went back to Kuala Lumpur, and we met with this lady, and she had finished the hut. And Prabhupada looked at the hut, and then he told us, he says, okay, now somebody's going to have to stay here and do worship every day. And then again, I volunteered, Prabhupada, I'll stay. And so the other devotees, Prabhupada was leaving Malaysia, so he was going to Australia. And then Bali Mardan and Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's servant at that time, they all went to Australia, and Hanuman and Lalita Krishna, the Chinese boy who became a devotee, they came here to India, and Amoga, he went to Indonesia. And then Srila Prabhupada told me, he said, I want you to stay here, and I want you to do 2 artis a day. You must do full artis. Of course, we don't have deities, I only have pictures. And I had to build an altar again. So I built one in Singapore, now I had to build a second one here in Malaysia. But I had all the paraphernalia I needed to build this, and so I built it. And he says, you stay in this temple and you establish it as a real temple and do worship every day here. And then I told him, yes, Prabhupada, I'll do this, I'll stay here. And so Prabhupada left, and then the other devotees also left to their different locations. And I was there by myself in Malaysia. And something to remember is that we never had any money. So I had no money, not even 1 penny. But I had to stay there, and then to get food to prepare for the altar, I would hitchhike into the city, and then I would go to the marketplace and I would beg from the shop people there, give me some food, give me some food. And then they always obliged me and gave me food, and then I would come back to the temple, and then I would have enough food to cook for a few days, and then when that was gone, I would have to again hitchhike to the city and beg again for more food. So I continued doing this, and then Prabhupada was continuing his negotiation with this Indian lady, and then she eventually decided not to give Prabhupada the land because she was a Kripana. She didn't want to give him the land. And so Prabhupada contacted me and he says, you don't have to stay in that temple anymore. You have to leave that temple. But I want you to stay in Malaysia. And so I said, yes, Prabhupada. So then, up to this point, I had at least some place to stay. I had the temple I was living in, and I had a place to sleep every night. But after this, I had nowhere to stay, and I would just hitchhike from one town to the next. And then sometimes I would get invited to stay in someone's home, and sometimes I would have to sleep on the side of the road. And always I would be anticipating where I was going to get food, but somehow or other Krishna always provided me food. I had enough food to eat. And even if I had to sleep outside, I didn't mind because Krishna took care of me. He took care of me. So I was very happy like this. And so things continued like this for some time. And then Prabhupada says, now I want you to go to Thailand. So Thailand and Malaysia are bordering countries. And so I said, yes, Prabhupada, I'll go to Thailand. And so I had only one way of transportation, that was hitchhiking. So I had to hitchhike from one country to the next, and I went to Thailand, and they have many Indians in Thailand also, but they were all, pretty much meat eaters and stuff like this. So it was more demoniac, and I met this one Chinese man, and he had a soy sauce factory. And he told me that I can stay in his factory. He has a bed, like a cot in the back. I could stay in that cot. And he was very kind. And to get food for me, there was one man downstairs from his soy sauce factory that was making dosa, South Indian. He was making dosa on the street, and so I would get one dosa every day. So that would be my food. So I was very happy with that. I'd get some food, and then I would somehow try to arrange a program. I would go to the Buddhist temples and preach to them, and I would preach to the Indians and try to have kirtan with them. But eventually my visa time in Thailand ran out, and so I had to go back to Malaysia. And when I got into Malaysia, then I was always perplexed that what am I going to do? I'm only by myself, and I got to do something, which is Krishna consciousness. But I was very fortunate that Maya, she never hassled me. She never antagonized me. I think Prabhupada told her, leave this boy alone. He's doing something for me. And so I stayed in there, and whatever I could do, I would try to do and preach as much as I could. And then Srila Prabhupada told me, he says, now I want you to go to Hong Kong. And so he said, I have a couple in Hong Kong, a young boy and his new wife, and they need some association. And so I said, yes, Prabhupada, I'll go to Hong Kong. And so, as I said, I never had any money, but somehow always that when it was time for me to go somewhere, I would go to the airport, and at the ticket counter, my ticket would be there. Someone had bought a ticket for me, and so I would get my ticket, and then I would go to wherever I had to go, So in this case, I went to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is on the, South China Sea, and so they get a lot of typhoons in Hong Kong. So the day that I arrived in Hong Kong, there was a typhoon that had come. And so I had just made it to where the temple was, and then I got in the elevator to go up, I don't remember which floor it was on, but to go up to where the temple was. And the elevator stopped because the typhoon had cut the electricity. And so I was in this elevator, a little tiny small box with like 5 Chinese people. And they were all jabbering away in Chinese, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And the lights were dark and everything. And so this continued for a few hours, and then finally the lift went up, and when we got to the floor, I went out and I joined with the other devotees. And for me, it was a big relief, because I'd been by myself for so long, and then finally I'm with some other devotees, and we had a place to stay. You know, I didn't have to sleep on the street or like this. We had a nice apartment, and we had food, and so it was quite. I was in quite ecstasy, and so they were also doing programs in Hong Kong, and they were working with the children of the Indian community, teaching them to dance and to prayers and this and that, and they would get to the parents through the children, and so this went on for some time, and I learned a lot during this time, but then it was time for me to leave Hong Kong. So Burijan, he had bought me a ticket on a cargo ship to go from Hong Kong back to Malaysia. And so as I boarded the cargo ship, we were starting to take out, but then there was suddenly a big typhoon coming, so our ship had to go in the opposite direction to wait for the typhoon to pass. And so we stayed there, and then as soon as that typhoon finished, then another typhoon was coming. So it took about 5 days, 6 days, just sitting in the sea, waiting for the typhoons to pass, so it would be safe for a voyage. And you know, during this time that I traveled, I didn't have any food. The food, you know, I went down and looked in the kitchen and on the ship, and they had all of these Chinese cooks, and they were cutting up fish, and blood was everywhere, and it was very disgusting. It was terrible. So I didn't eat anything, but somehow I got, every day I would get 1 can of condensed milk, and I would mix that with hot water and make milk to drink. So I had maybe 3 cups of milk a day is what I ate on this journey. But then finally, when my ship got back to Singapore, I was supposed to get off in Singapore. The man from the sea came to the boat, the customs officer or the immigration officer, and he checked. You know, he had his way of communicating. He had like a ship-to-shore radio, a walkie-talkie, and he took my passport information, and then he called his office on the radio, and then he was waiting for them to respond, and then when they responded, they told me that you are on a blacklist, and so you cannot enter Singapore. So I said, what am I going to do? So I had to stay on the ship as it continued its next destination, which was in Malaysia. And so I went on the ship again. I didn't have any food, so it was already about 10 days that I'd been on the ship, and all I had was just 1 can of condensed milk every day for 10 days. And finally we reached one port, and the ship's docked there, and then I got off and I told him, I said, okay, I have to get off here, but I don't have any money, I cannot pay you. So there's nothing they could do, so they they just let me go, and so I got off the boat. And then now again I was in Malaysia. And then I said, now what am I going to do? I'm here. Prabhupada wants me to stay here. He wants me to preach. What am I going to do? How can I help Prabhupada with his mission? And so I waited. I hitchhiked up to the next city that I was familiar with, and I had some people there that I knew. And so once I got there, they welcomed me, and then I explained my situation, but they welcomed me, and then I thought, what can I do to spread Krishna consciousness to these people? So I remembered something that Srila Prabhupada said one time. He says that if you want to approach a rich man, he's not so easily approachable. But if you see him in the park with his dog, and you make friends with his dog, then you can become his friend. So I thought, what is most dear to these people? And so they didn't have dogs, but they had children. So I said, okay, these children are most dear to them. And so I would gather together all of the children, and they were very receptive to Krishna consciousness, and I would teach them our prayers, and I teach them how to play kartals, and then we would have kirtans, and we would sing the prayers and dance. And then I said, okay, I had an idea. I said, what we're going to do is we're going to make some puppets, hand puppets. And then we're going to put on a puppet show for your parents. So what did I do? I took some balloons, and little balloons, I blew them up to be about this big. And then on the outside of the balloons, we put paper mache. You know paper mache? We put paper mache on this. And the paper mache would harden, and then we would paint them like faces. And we would take yarn and make hair. So we made Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and Jagai and Madhai. And then we made these things. And then for their bodies, we took some cloth, and the girls sewed the thing that you'd put your hand into. And so we made these puppets, and then I told the kids what the stories of Lord Chaitanya and Jagai and Madhai were, and then they practiced this, and then I told them, okay, now we're going to have a program at the temple, and you're going to put on this puppet show for your parents. So you tell them that they have to come. And you tell your mothers that they have to cook prasadam for all of the guests. And so the parents, of course, they're always very, anxious to do anything for their children. And so once they were given these instructions by their parents and by the kids, they did this, and the parents participated in this. They made the prasadam, and then we would have the puppet show in one temple, and the Indians from one city would come to another city because they're all friends, and then they would enjoy the show, and then afterwards I would give a lecture on the story of what's happening with Jagai and Madhai. And then they would they would enjoy this, and they would do this. And so in this way we got the children involved in this Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, and the parents would chant, And so I would do this in different cities, and this way I was successful in preaching to these Indian people. So it was very, very useful. But I didn't know until later that, Prabhupada had made such an impact on these people that, now in Malaysia there's more than 40 temples. And I've had people come up to me and say, oh yes, I came to your program when I was a little boy, when I was 5 or 6 years old. And then I came with my family, and then we started chanting Hare Krishna. And then one guy came up and he said, my grandmother went to your show, and she saw that you guys are vegetarian, and they were eating meat at that time. And so he said that my grandmother said, from now on we are not going to eat any more meat. We're going to be vegetarian again, and we're going to start to do worship in our house. And so now there's still devotees. So as I said, now there's at least 40 temples in Malaysia. But after some time in Malaysia, Prabhupada told me, he says, I want you to go to Indonesia. Because the boy who had gone to Indonesia before me, he wanted to get married. And so I was going to relieve him so he could go to Australia to get married. And so I did that. And Australia for me was, Indonesia for me was more difficult because the kids there that I had to work with were high school age, and they were spoiled, and they really didn't want anything to do with Krishna or this and that. But I still tried as best as possible to preach to them. So it was very good. And because it was a school I was working at the end of the school semester, it's time for summer vacation. Fortunately, the Indians, they bought me a ticket back to India. And so I got on a plane and I went back to India, and I got off in Calcutta. So right now I'll stop a minute. If you have any questions, you can ask. No one has any questions?
I have a comment.
Comment? Yes.
You have really worked like Prabhupada worked so diligently. And all the difficulties you faced, you come out like Prabhupada did the same thing.
Yes.
So we are very impressed, and we are glad to meet you and hear you. And I'm so glad that you remember so many names, so many cities
Yeah.
at this age. So my compliments to you.
Thank you. But the thing is that you have to be willing to serve, and whatever difficulties you may face, they're like a pebble in the sand. There's nothing. Nothing's. So Krishna will take care of you. So I tell you more stories. So once I arrived back in Calcutta, I went to 3 Albert Road, which is the temple we have in Calcutta at that time. And I was very lucky because Srila Prabhupada was there. And so I got to have association with Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada was arranging for us to go to his temple that he grew up with as a child. And it was run by the Malik family. And so we went to this temple, and Prabhupada was there, and Srila Prabhupada was being cordial to all of the people who were there, and one by one he was asking them how they were doing, and I'm sure that they were all, they were all his age at that time, and so they were children at one time when Prabhupada was a child, and now they were grown, and he would just, very politely speak with them, and then he would go to the next person, whether it be a man or a woman. Oh, he would address them by name. Oh, this and that. How are you doing? Blah 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 blah. And then Prabhupada was going around to the different members of this family, and then this one man, he was younger, but he told me, he says, "Oh, Swamiji, you have to help me. You have to do something. And what am I, what am I going to do? I'm in such big trouble." Prabhupada says, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" He says, I need to find a husband for my daughter." And then he says, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry." And then this man was very persistent, and he kept saying, "But Swamiji, I need to find a husband for my daughter. What can I do? What can I do?" And he says, "I have to find a husband for my daughter." And then I'm sitting there thinking, leave Prabhupada alone. He wants to just continue his program. He wants to preach. He wants to do his program. He wants to have kirtan. I said, just leave him alone. But he kept going on and on and on like this, and Prabhupada was becoming disturbed more and more by this man's, reactions to the situation, and so. And I'm sitting there thinking, just leave Prabhupada alone. I'm thinking to myself, and then he says, "I have to find a husband for my daughter." And then he pointed to this girl sitting next to him. And she was a big fat girl and ugly. And, and then I was thinking, no wonder you can't find a husband for her. He says, you better get used to it. She'll be in your house until she's 30. And then, and as I said, Prabhupada is very intuitive. He knows what you're thinking. And so he kept saying like this. And so finally Prabhupada, he became very frustrated. And then he raised his hand and he told the man, "Okay, stop. You don't have to worry anymore. Your daughter will marry this boy." And then he points at me. And so I was thinking, "Oh, Prabhupada, how can you do this to me? I don't want to marry this." And then after this, we went back to the Calcutta temple, and every day I would hear a car pull up, and I was thinking, "Oh, it's this guy's family. They're coming to get me. They're going to take me, and I'm going to have to marry." But fortunately, they never came. So. But this lila, I call it like killing two birds with one stone. So he made this man stop harassing Prabhupada, and then he punished me by telling me that I was going to marry this girl, you know. So, and I was a confirmed, brahmachari. I didn't want to get married, so it's like that. But up to this point, I had been in all of these Asian countries by myself, and I had come back here to India, and then we began at that time developing Mayapur project, and at the same time they started developing Bombay. So most of the devotees would go to Bombay because Bombay is a big city, and they had facilities there. They had buildings on the land that we had, and some of us went to Mayapur. So, how many have been to Mayapur? Yeah, did you enjoy it there? Yes? Yes. So, Mayapur at one time was very, 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 very austere. And nobody wanted to go to Mayapur because they had no facilities. We didn't have any place to sleep. We had to sleep outside. We didn't have any toilets. We had only one pump for water. Hare Krishna. So we would use this to get water. And then, but Bombay, they had, as I said, they had more land, they had buildings, and the devotees, they had access to many things because they were in the city. But in Mayapur, there was no one. So anyone who would come to Mayapur, they would normally stay, they would come in the morning, and by evening they would leave because they couldn't stay there because it was so austere. So there was four devotees who stayed in Mayapur. Jayapataka Swami, Janani Vas, a devotee named Prabhas, he was an Indian boy, and myself. So we were the four who stayed in Mayapur. And at this time, Radha Madhava hadn't come yet, so there was no deities there. And so we had to sleep, the Prabhupada's Bhajan Kuntir was there, but we had to sleep outside because that was Prabhupada's place to sleep. And so we had only, if you had a mosquito net, okay, you were okay most of the time, if the mosquitoes didn't get through your net. But people who would come to Mayapur, they think, oh, I'll go to Mayapur, and then they'd get to Mayapur, and then again, first they get attacked by the mosquitoes and the insects, and then the bad weather, no place to eat, and then no food or nothing. And so that's why they would come in the morning and leave in the evening. So even the devotees who came with Srila Prabhupada. So from time to time, Prabhupada would come and visit there, and he would adapt himself so quickly and just settle in right away and sit in his Bhajan Kuntir or take a walk around his property. But his entourage, his people who were with him, they would try to steal your mosquito net and this and that, and they'd want to get out. They just want to get out and go back to Calcutta. So nobody wanted to stay in Mayapur. So it was a very very difficult place. But for me, it was like paradise because Mayapur is austere, yes, but it was so serene. It was quiet, and in the morning, the mist would be there, and you would hear some boys taking the buffalo to the rivers, and they would be singing songs, and oh, it was so nice. And for me, every day, I would go to Srivas Angam. You know Srivas Angam? So, or Chaitanya Mat. And so I would go down there, and I would go up to the door in the Srivas Angam, and then I would knock on the door. Let me in, let me in. I want to join your Sankirtan party. Please let me in. And then they never, of course, never responded, let me in, because that was reserved for Lord Chaitanya and his very intimate devotees or disciples. And so I told him, okay, you don't let me in, then I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to chant. So I would do that every day. I'd sit there and I'd chant all of my rounds, and then I'd go back to our land in Mayapur, yeah. And slowly the projects began to develop. So there was a competition between Bombay and Mayapur to get building cements and bricks and this and that. And so when we got the bricks, finally we got bricks, and then we built in the veranda of Prabhupada's Bhajan Kuntir, we built a temple, a small brick temple for Radha Madhava. So by this time Radha Madhava had come, and they were there, and in the very beginning, as soon as they came, Jananivas took charge of the deities, and so even today he's still in charge of Radha Madhava. So he was always there. And then Prabhas, he was the cook. And myself and Javitaka Swami, we were in charge of the construction. And so by this time we had built an office, a brick for Javitaka and myself, and next to those offices, our office, we had a go-down for storing cement and this and that. And so when our cement came, we would unload it into the go-down and put it in the go-down. So I can remember that when our first shipment of cement arrived there in Mayapur, there was so much, and then we had 3 or 4 lorries that we had rented to put the cement on so we could bring it back to Mayapur. And I had all of these coolies that I had hired to load up the trucks. And so when they started to load the trucks, they kept, one guy'd go into the thing and he would grab one bag of cement, and then he would walk out to the car and put it in there, and then another guy would take one bag of cement, and they were taking too much time. And I was the treasurer, and we were paying these guys by the hour. And so I told him, no. He says, you guys follow me. So I made them stand in a line, going from where the cement was in the train to the trucks. And then I grabbed one bag of cement and I threw it in the arms of the guy behind me, and then said, now you give it to him. So then one by one, so slowly all of the the cement was loaded into the trucks. And then we got back to Mayapur, and then I told him, says, now you do the same thing. You know, you put it in the go down. So at this time I didn't help them. Once we got to Mayapur, I let them do it themselves. So we did like that, and then slowly we started the construction work. So we should stop. Okay. Any questions?
Let's chant 3 times in gratitude for Gopal. Hari Bol.
Hari Hare Krishna. Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Jai. Hare Krishna. Jai.
Srila Prabhupada
Ki Jai.